There are names that men say out loud, and there are names that only slip out through clenched teeth when night falls and conscience starts to bleed. Nemesis belonged to the second kind. She didn't arrive with thunder tearing across the sky, nor with armies marching over walls. Her presence was more cruel. It came in the silence after victory, in the empty gaze of the crowned king, in the laughter that died before reaching the lips. Where there was excess, she breathed. Where there was pride, she waited. Where a mortal thought himself greater than the gods, Nemesis began to weave his downfall with invisible fingers. Many believed that divine punishment was immediate, brutal, radiant. They were mistaken. The vengeance of Nemesis matured, like poison kept in a golden cup. She did not punish only crimes. She punished imbalances. She punished beauty that humiliated, wealth that trampled, glory that forgot its own fragility. A hero could defeat monsters. A king could conquer cities. A queen could bathe in praise. But if their hearts leaned too far into pride, Nemesis would lift her gaze. And when she looked, fate changed direction. Narcissus discovered this before his own reflection. Kings discovered it in the dust of their palaces. Warriors discovered it when their swords weighed heavy as guilt in their hands. Nemesis didn't need to shout. The whole world would bow to carry out her sentence. This is the story of the goddess who never forgave arrogance, the dark justice that turned pride into ruin. In Greek mythology, Nemesis was not just a goddess of vengeance. She was something older, colder, and more frightening, the force that returned to the world what pride tried to steal. The Greeks feared hubris, excessive arrogance, that sickness of the soul that made kings, heroes, and mortals believe they could surpass the limits set by the gods. And when that arrogance grew too much, when man forgot he was made of flesh, shadow, and death, Nemesis would appear. She did not represent impulsive anger. Her punishment was measured, patient, and heavy. It was like a dark scale, slowly tipping until it crushed those who had gone too far. In some traditions, she was the daughter of the night. In others, the daughter of the ocean. But in all of them, she carried the same fate, to watch over human excesses. Nemesis did not pursue only murderers or traitors. She went after the vain, the arrogant, the untouchable, those who smiled at the pain of others. Before we proceed further on this dark and mysterious journey, subscribe to the channel, make sure to leave a like on this video, and tell me in the comments which city and state you're watching from. I want to know where this story is reaching. Maybe Sao Paulo, Minas Gerais, Bahia, Paraná, Rio de Janeiro, Ceará, or some quiet corner of Brazil. Because ancient stories never die. They just travel through the centuries, searching for new years to remind of a forgotten truth. No throne is too high, no face too beautiful, no name too great when Nemesis decides to collect. Before she was feared as vengeance, Nemesis was understood as balance. Not a peaceful, delicate, or radiant balance, but a strict order that demanded payment when someone crossed the line. The Greeks believed that the universe had invisible measures. Each man had his share of glory, beauty, power, and fortune. To want more than what was destined for you was to invite destruction. This excess had a terrible name: hubris. It wasn't just pride, it was an insult against the divine order. It was the moment when a mortal looked up to the sky and believed himself above it. Nemesis was born at exactly that moment, not as a warrior charging across an open field, but as a shadow behind the banquet, waiting for the wine to go to the heads of the arrogant. Her justice was different from the justice of the courts. It didn't depend on witnesses, decrees, or judges. She saw what no one would confess. A man could deceive the city, could buy off priests, could erase traces of blood, but he couldn't hide from Nemesis the weight of his own excess. In her symbolic hand, a scale often appeared. Not to weigh coins, but souls. not to measure innocence but excess. She was also associated with the wheel, a sign that fortune turns. Those who step on others today may wake up tomorrow beneath the rubble of their own name. That's why her presence haunted the powerful. The higher someone climbed, the closer they were to her gaze. Nemesis did not hate greatness. What she destroyed was greatness corrupted by arrogance. Among all the sins that attracted Nemesis, vanity held a special place. Beauty, when mixed with contempt, became a blade pointed at one's own chest. That's how it was with Narcissus, the young man so beautiful he made hearts collapse in silence. Nymphs, maidens, and men admired him as if they were gazing at a living statue. But Narcissus loved no one but his own superiority. Every passionate look he received was treated like dust. Every plea was crushed by his indifference. Among those who suffered because of him was Echo, the nymph condemned to repeat only the last words of others. She loved Narcissus, but received only contempt in return. Echo's pain rose to the heavens like bitter smoke. And Nemesis heard. The goddess did not descend with a sword, did not send any beast, did not open the earth beneath the young man's feet. His punishment was more refined, more intimate, more cruel. She led Narcissus to a spring of clear water. There he saw his own face reflected and was captivated by the image he had always adored without realizing it. He fell in love with himself. He longed to touch that impossible reflection. He suffered for a beauty he could not possess, even though it was his own. The one who scorned others became a prisoner of his own charm. The one who had rejected all love died consumed by an empty love. Nemesis didn't need to stain her hands. It was enough to deliver Narcissus to the mirror of his own soul. The arrogance of kings has always been more dangerous than the vanity of youth, because a proud king drags entire peoples into the abyss. In ancient Greece, rulers were reminded that their crown did not make them gods. The throne raised the body, but it didn't free anyone from death. Even so, many kings became intoxicated with power. They heard too many applauses, received too many bows, commanded too many armies. Little by little, they stopped listening to their own humanity. Nemesis watched these palaces like someone observing a tree rotten from the inside. On the outside, marble, gold, and music. On the inside, termites of pride devouring everything. When a king humiliated the weak, when he believed his will was a law above divine law, the wheel began to turn. Punishment could come in the form of a lost war, a dead heir, a ruined harvest, palace betrayal, or madness growing behind the eyes. The punishment of Nemesis was terrible because it seemed to arise from the culprit's own choices. She didn't need to invent ruin. She just allowed arrogance to finish its work. The king who ignored advice ended up surrounded by flatterers. The king who crushed his subjects ended up feared but never loved. The king who thought himself eternal built his own tomb with decrees. Thus, Nemesis taught a bitter truth. Power without limits is a noose around the neck. The higher the throne, the longer the fall when the goddess decides to pull the ground out from under you. The most frightening aspect of Nemesis was her patience. She did not act on human time, for people want quick punishments and immediate tears. The goddess knew the value of waiting. She knew that some downfalls need to ripen in order to hurt more deeply. She knew that some arrogant people first need to believe they've won. This delay confused mortals. They looked at the unjust prospering and wondered where justice was. They saw a cruel man laughing at banquets and thought the gods had closed their eyes. But Nemesis did not sleep. She was just waiting for the moment when the culprit's own victory would turn into a trap. Her justice came like winter after a stolen harvest. Slow, inevitable, seeping through the cracks until it froze the heart. Sometimes her punishment was external: loss, defeat, illness, exile, public shame. Other times it was internal: paranoia, emptiness, remorse, and inability to feel peace. This was her most subtle cruelty, making the guilty carry within themselves the court, the executioner, and the sentence. Nemesis did not just destroy bodies, she corroded certainties. She made the arrogant doubt their own reflection, their own luck, their own applause. When the goddess drew near, even wealth felt heavy. Even beauty seemed like a curse. Even glory smelt like a grave. Her delay was not weakness. It was precision. As time went by, temples fell, cities changed their names, and ancient priests turned to dust. But Nemesis remained. Her name endured through the centuries because it touched a wound that never healed. The fear that every excess will one day be paid for. Even today, we call Nemesis anything that pursues, confronts, or brings someone down. The word left the Greek temples and entered everyday language. This happened because Nemesis never belonged only to mythology. She represents a deep truth about the human condition. Every arrogant person believes they're the exception. Every unjust, powerful person believes they will get away with it. Every cruel, vain person believes their beauty, fame, or position will serve as a shield. But history insists on showing the opposite. Empires fall, fortunes disappear, names that were once untouchable become whispered warnings. Nemesis endures because the world keeps producing men and women who go beyond their limits, who mistake privilege for divinity, applause for eternity. She is the dark symbol of consequence, not an empty revenge, but of the inevitable response to imbalance. Maybe that's why her image still gives people chills, because everyone, in some secret corner of their soul, knows when they've gone too far. And when that thought creeps up in the dark, the name Nemesis seems to breathe just behind the door. Nemesis wasn't the goddess's screams, but her returns. Everything someone threw out into the world with arrogance, contempt, and excess would come back by her hand. The arrogant would throw out humiliation and receive shame in return. The vain would cast out coldness and receive loneliness. The king would unleash tyranny and receive a downfall. Her justice had neither the warmth of mercy nor the desperation of human vengeance. It was older, drier, sharper. It was the certainty that the universe does not tolerate for long anything that grows beyond its limits. That's why the compelling story of Nemesis remains powerful today. It doesn't just talk about Greek gods, sacred springs, or forgotten kings. It speaks about anyone who, after achieving something, starts to look down on those left behind. It speaks about that dangerous moment when beauty turns into cruelty, power turns into blindness, intelligence turns into mockery, and victory becomes a license to crush others. Nemesis appears exactly at that point, when the soul leans toward excess and starts to rot from within, even while the world is still applauding on the outside. And maybe that's the darkest lesson of all. No one needs to summon Nemesis to be found by her. All it takes is to go beyond the limit, to laugh at someone else's pain, to look at your own reflection, your own throne, your own name, and believe that nothing can ever fall. Then, at some invisible point in fate, the wheel begins to turn. The silence changes its weight, luck changes its face, and the goddess who turns arrogance into ruin takes her first step.